And welcome in everybody to SEC Football and Beyond for this Monday, July 26th. And boy, what a whirlwind it's been. We've been with you, of course, all last week. We broke down Ole Miss and Missouri on Thursday, but kind of the world just spun on its axis last Wednesday, with the expansion talks, and it's going to take up a lot of what we're going to talk about today. We will get to the breakdown of Kentucky and LSU. Those are the next two teams, or now two-a-days. We'll get to Florida and A&M on Thursday live, and it'll again drop on Friday. But just happy to welcome back Neil McCready, who's back from, he was in the epicenter of all of this. When this was, the sparks were flying, he was in Birmingham. We told you that last week. So welcome Neil back. And Neil, quite a week.
You know, it was funny. Wednesday afternoon, I was in the Winfrey there at the Hyatt Regency in Birmingham, and I was talking to former Ole Miss athletics director, current Texas A&M athletics director, Ross Bjork, down in the lobby, and we were just catching up on life. We were talking about families and doing the COVID talk that everybody has with each other, you know, about what was coming and all that stuff. And I remember thinking to myself as we were talking, and it was me and him and Richard Cross, who's a radio guy in Mississippi, lives here in Oxford. And so we were just chatting, you know, three guys that have known each other for a long time and really weren't talking about football. But I remember thinking, why are you here? To Ross, like, I've never seen an AD at media days. I've covered media days for a long time, and I had never seen an AD at media days. And about 10 minutes, somewhere in there, after he and I bid each other adieu, that story broke in the Houston Chronicle, and my very first thought was, this leaked from Texas A&M. And it made me wonder if Ross knew what was coming. I still don't know. I have my suspicions. But he was there, and he did the rounds and talked to people. And frankly, it has been, as you know, the hot topic of conversation throughout the last several days. Texas and Oklahoma filed essentially for divorce from the Big 12 this morning. They have applied essentially to the SEC. The SEC will, the presidents will have a meeting on Thursday, at which point, and Chris, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in a minute, at which point I anticipate that they will be issued a formal invitation to join the league, and I believe they will accept that invitation. I think Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC is a foregone conclusion at this point. There is now all sorts of buzz around the country. If you talk to people, and I know you have, about what's going to happen to the rest of the Big 12. Andy Staples, a good friend of mine with The Athletic, wrote this morning a column about this would be a time for the Big Ten to go basically hunting and expand from 14 to as many as 20 teams. And when Andy went into the specificity of which schools the Big Ten would go after, I thought, this is Andy being a little bit more than a columnist here. This is Andy telling people, read between the lines a little bit. And then what has been interesting for me, Chris, not that Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC is not interesting enough, because it absolutely is. It is a monumental development in college athletics. It is one that strengthens an already incredibly strong conference and absolutely devastates another. But there's this buzz that won't quite go away. And that's the only way I know how to describe it. There's this buzz, Chris, that the SEC isn't done at 16. That the SEC, as someone referred to it, may even go after the hostile takeover, where the SEC just goes out and says, we're going to control this. We're going to go cherry pick up to 20 and have this super league. And keep in mind, Chris, as we tape this on a Monday, 1 week ago today, Greg Sankey took the podium at SEC Media Days in Birmingham. A few hours after Ross Dellinger of SI wrote a story that very liberally quoted Sankey, and I don't mean liberal in a political way. I mean, there was a lot of Greg Sankey in this story. And Greg Sankey was very critical of the NCAA, of the current NCAA model, He was very forthright about things might be changing and that things needed to change. And I can't help but remember that story in the back of my mind as we sit here 7 days later and wonder, hey, is this about to be a really wild cycle of realignment and expansion and dramatic change throughout the college athletics landscape? Because there's this, the buzz part, I'll say this, then I'll shut up. The buzz part of this, there's a part of me that thinks, nah, this is just people that are still kind of talking to people in athletics, and those people are still kind of charged up, and there's a lot out there, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and maybe some people are misinterpreting what's happening. And then there's a part of me that wonders, I go back to something, Chris, that two things. For years, I've said Oklahoma's leaving the Big 12, and I always thought Oklahoma would go to the SEC. I thought the Big 12 would fall apart. It made sense that the Big 12 would fall apart. And sure enough, here it is. And now it makes sense if you're looking around the country and you are Clemson, you are Ohio State, you are Michigan, you're USC. Let me make sure I state this correctly. I'm not at all speculating that those teams are going to jump into some super league. But it absolutely makes sense today, Chris, that those teams would look around at the landscape, look at the SEC, and start thinking 10 years ahead and think, what's the best way for us to protect our future? For us to be positioned to be able to thrive in 2030 and beyond?
Well, I think that what this does, this change does bring about where is the future. I think with basically the NCAA being taken out of business by Congress. I mean, people say the NCAA backed out. Well, Congress said you're done. Other than, that tournament you run in March, I mean, there's not a whole lot that they do. And maybe how they've handled it, maybe how they've just thrown their hands up is created a power vacuum that maybe that's what the SEC is doing. And there is a lot of thought of, do they go to 18 to 20 to 24 and get maybe two and almost have an NFL-like, where you're not going to have 16 in one. You would have like maybe 24 and 24. I don't know. I don't know where this is headed. And it does complicate matters to this degree. There's no question that deals and contracts are made to be broken. Every contract is a little different. Like, it's a lot of money. I mean, here's what I think is interesting is, first of all, is how's Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12 going to play this? Because it's, they basically said we're not extending our grants of rights, which means they either going to, A, play there for a couple of more years at least and just have a very contentious situation, or there's going to be buyouts. There's a lot of money there. In the ACC, there's a huge buyout over the last expansion. So to leave there is an issue. But here's what I would recommend. If I were, I don't know, I'll just take the ACC. I would take a look and see. Could I interest Penn State in coming in? Could I would maybe say, look, because you got to expand by twos. You need to maybe quit being so snooty about their academic standards and say, you know what, West Virginia is a really good fit for us geographically and Pitt. And if you can get Penn State in, maybe you go get a Maryland, back. You can, and then maybe you get Notre Dame. I mean, you do that, then you've got to basically do that, because if you don't, then you run the risk of being overtaken, because what then happens if you're the Big Ten now? The Big Ten, they've got this history of you've got to be a certain type of research university academically to get in, and you got to, okay, I mean, that's fine, but what do you want to do? I mean, I think they're out of the Notre Dame business, even though that was always, maybe thought geographically the sensible fit, but what do they do? Where do they go? Do they try to make a move? What is the Pac-12 with the new commissioner? And by the way, they're starting their media days tomorrow, and you think anybody's going to have a single question about football? It's going to be about, what are you going to do?
Sure.
What are you going to do now, Mr. Kleinskopf? I mean, and how about that poor guy? I mean, you talk about getting indoctrinated into college athletics, and he hadn't unpacked his boxes yet, and he's trying to figure out what the hell's going on. He wasn't part of the courting of Texas and Oklahoma, but he knows about it, and okay, they're off the table. What do we do? What can we do? And, I get this, and, folks throw out a lot. Well, Big 12's going to do this. What do we say all the time about brands? Folks, it's not about who the best football team is. If it was, the SEC would have gone after Iowa State, not Texas, because they got a better team this year. That's not what it's about, So what does Iowa State bring to the table? Well, it's a good program. It doesn't move the needle. Is it a fit for the Big Ten? I don't know. It doesn't move the needle. I think we're now at the stage of the schools you can purge that are purgeable. Texas and Oklahoma has always been low-hanging fruit because the Big 12 is low-hanging fruit. And once Texas, I always said, Texas decides they're going to leave, Oklahoma's always wanted to leave. I agree with you. Oklahoma wanted to move the last time. Their SEC is going to move by twos. We want Texas and you and not one. We don't want Oklahoma and Oklahoma State like people say, oh, the hell, it's not what it is. The brand matters. And it doesn't matter if Texas changes their football coach every 3 years for the next 20 years. Their brand matters.
Yeah, it's a sexy brand, man. I mean, those were
huge.
You talk about purgeable programs. Those were the two purgeable schools
and then Notre Dame is going to do what they want to do if they want to do it when they want to do it. And maybe they get on board. Maybe this is I don't know. That's what I don't know.
So do you put any stock at all into this? It's not even a rumor. It's just kind of out there, right? That the Clemsons of the world look at this, and I know there's a contract and all that stuff. I get it. That the Clemsons of the world sort of look at this and say, yeah, we're fine now. We've got this great brand today. We're fine. Today. 2021, we're awesome. We're a top 5 program. We're winning big. We can do whatever we want, etc. Things change. Great leaders are the ones that look ahead, project that change, and act accordingly. Again, Greg, thank you. Who deserves a ton of credit for two things. One, a year ago, he saves college football, and now he's completely ahead of this. He pulls this off. It's almost mafia style. Nobody even saw it happening. One guy on the rebelgrove.com message board, Chris, about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months, posted and said this was going to happen. And I made a couple of calls, and I was like, oh, you might be right, but I never could get anywhere with it. Greg Sankey got this done with nobody writing about it, nobody talking about it. It breaks in the Houston Chronicle on a Wednesday afternoon. Damnedest thing in the world. But so you have to think, these other schools, you mentioned Ohio State, you mentioned Michigan, these schools, they look around and they have to be thinking to themselves, are we in position to be thriving in 6 years, in 7 years, in 8 years with this changing landscape of college athletics? Because like you said, and you're exactly right, Chris, Congress killed the NCAA. I don't know whether it's a breakaway of the top 65 or what it is, but college athletics aren't going to look the same in 2028 as they do today. And the SEC, by adding these two major brands, and you're exactly right when you use that word, by adding these two major brands to their catalog, Texas, Oklahoma, and all that comes with that, they're much more attractive long-term. If you're ESPN, Disney, whatever, you added two huge programs to your mix. So now you've got Texas and OU and LSU and Alabama and Auburn and Florida and Georgia, and you've got whichever of the other SEC schools, whether it's Ole Miss or South Carolina or Kentucky or whoever pops up and gets super hot for a couple of years as they do, Mississippi State, whatever. You've got all this catalog to choose from, and from a menu standpoint, you're just set. And when they go to a 12-team playoff, you're going to have 4 or 5 SEC teams in that playoff every single year without fail.
Yeah, I think one of the things I mentioned last week is there's no way this takes place without the heavy involvement, if not the instigation by Disney and ESPN. They're tied into this. So people will talk a lot about, well, the Longhorn Network. Let me remind you that when they were flirting with the Pac-12, the salvation to keep the last-minute Hail Mary to keep the Big 12 alive was the Longhorn Network. Oklahoma did their own thing, but the Longhorn Network got their money. They got that, plus they got the Big 12 money, which my understanding is a little bit more of a share than the rest on the Big 12 money because they appear more on national games than the rest. So they get more of the Big 12 money, and they get to keep all of the Longhorn Network money. Well, who owns the Longhorn Network? ESPN. That has not worked out very well. They would love nothing more to be able to fold in that deal and say, okay, you're making $15 million on that a year. I've had people tell me that when this is all said and done, the money, the check for each school for the TV rights will probably be upwards of $75 million a school when this is all said and done.
Yep.
So how do you like, you like 15 million. How would you like to immediately go to like 45? Does that sound good to you? Sounds good. Thank you. So that's a big part of that. ESPN is a big player. And so I don't know. Let's remind folks that the ACC network owned by ESPN. Do they want it all in one? I think they're a factor. I would think that the ACC would have a preemptive strike because I think that this is only the start of who's going to make the next move. And we'll see if it's the ACC. I think the Big Ten is in strong position, but they can't get weakened. I think the Pac-12 has to look out and figure some things out. But the remaining schools, look, UCF, USF, BYU, Cincinnati, Memphis, they don't move the needle. All that does is put numbers into a conference. So the Big 12, without Texas and Oklahoma, with any one of those combinations of team, is just a conference that is on the par with the AAC. It is no longer a Power 5. It's a group of whatever we're going to call it, group of 6. So they can't survive with that.
No, they can't. They're dead. They're dead. They're in the hospital dead, and everybody knows it. They've got a life support system, and it's still beeping, but they're gone. They're never getting out of that hospital alive. And they know it. And I know that's not a great analogy with all the COVID stuff going on, but they are finished. There's no way. If you're Kansas right now, you're on the phone and you're looking, and if someone makes you an offer, you're gone. If you're Iowa State, same. If you're Oklahoma State, same. If you're Texas Tech, same. You are on the phone. You are getting out. That's why I believe, personally, Chris, that Oklahoma and Texas are going to be playing in the SEC in 2022. Because there's a lot of people tell me that when someone in the SEC office told me that there would be no way. Well, first of all, I talked with someone in the Big 12 office that I've known for years, and I said, well, and they said, this was inevitable. I mean, the issue was they knew that the end of the Longhorn Network, again, has a lot of years left, but Texas would be fine with ripping that up because they're going to make more money in being part of the SEC, particularly when this new deal gets in. And the framework of that deal with ABC, ESPN has been done, but you imagine that's going to be tweaked a little bit. But anyway, sure. It's the issue is now is trying to figure out again who's going to take that next step, how it's going to play off. I think that look the thing that also factored in that I'm learning a little bit more is, Texas got what they wanted, but what they saw, and they will never admit this publicly, but they've admired what's happened at A&M. Oh, sure.
Their status is increased, and they said, we like some of that. And things haven't gone as well on the field. And here's the thing, too, politically. Let me remind you that when they were floating the Pac-12, that was a different president, a different board that were more academically oriented. These guys here, particularly the new board of supervisors, is a big athletic size, and I think understanding that we need to go with the long-term viability because, the Longhorn Network, that ain't going to get renewed. And we got a number of years left, but where do we go then? Then what? And the Big 12 has done everything they can to bend over backward for Texas and Oklahoma. Why? Because their whole league was built around Texas and Oklahoma. So they got all the advantages. Why? Because without them, they're nothing. They're not nothing football-wise. They've got good football teams, but as a brand, to go sell to the TV market, they're nothing. I learned this. I was not aware of this. Last year, when ESPN struck a deal with the SEC in the middle of COVID, we came on the air. It was one of our first shows, first couple of weeks. Yep. When it happened live and we were part of the breaking it or it was coming out. Do you know at the same time, the Big 12 approached their network partners about getting a new deal because it's only a couple of years. They said, no, we're good. We're going to wait. That's a signal that, look, we don't have a brand, and even with us here at Texas and Oklahoma, we don't have enough to make the big money. And look at what the heck's going on at the SEC and their money. It's all about that. It's all about brand, and it's what drives it. And look, I don't like it for the Big 12. Football-wise, I don't like it. But because I personally, I kind of like the old. It's just you don't have to like it. It's just the way it is now. It's all about money.
Yeah, it's changed.
It's just changed. How are we gonna do it? Well, what are we gonna do? My God, they're gonna have pods. They're gonna do it. That's to figure out. But they can figure it out after they go to the bank and start cashing a whole lot of checks. And what they do is, the bigger the conferences are, the less you can truly determine who the best one is because you don't play a lot of. You bigger and bigger you get. But that's the way it's going to be. And I do think. I do feel for the schools in the Big 12 that are not named Texas and Oklahoma, and there wasn't anything they could do. They weren't in a strong enough position to go. They went out and got West Virginia. West Virginia was looking for a home, and why wasn't a geographical fit? That was pretty good. That's pretty good. It's not like they can go and say, you know what, we're going to get Iowa to leave the Big Ten. No one's going to leave the SEC. The SEC has no buyout. How arrogant is that? Because nobody's going to leave. And for the people that keep tweeting us I think Arkansas ought to leave for the Big 12. Do you understand why we said how foolish that is? It has nothing to do with football. Of course nobody's going to leave the Big 10. You can lose all day you want. You're going to make a whole bunch of money. So the point is, where do you go if you're the Big 12? You can't really say, oh, go and get BYU. Great, go get BYU. It doesn't matter. Go get USF. It's at this point, it may make you better than the way you are right now without Texas, Oklahoma, but they don't have a real answer. They still could be as good, or here's what they've got to do. They're fighting.
If you're Oklahoma State, I'm not interrupting for a second. If you're Oklahoma State, you can't sit still and go.
Oh no! But where do you go? You can't go. I can tell you, I don't think Oklahoma fits the profile of what the Big Ten wants, or the Pac-12 wants, and I think TCU and Baylor are in the same situation. So something's got to give.
If I'm Oklahoma State, as crazy as this sounds, Chris, I'm calling all three of those leagues you just mentioned. If anybody bites, I'm gone.
Well, of course. Easy. Easy.
And if they don't, I got to be honest, I'm looking into the AAC before I say.
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the battle. Does the Big 12 get UCF, or can the AAC go get Oklahoma State? Who has the stronger brand now? It's an interesting fight. Who has the most money? I don't know that. That's going to be the key. So to me, if you're the Big 12, you go get probably UCF and USF to basically weaken the AAC. Do you consider a Cincinnati? You consider a Memphis? I think you have to look at that. Is it going to put you where you were with Texas and Oklahoma? No, but it could keep you ahead of the AAC. Or you could fall below them.
what do you think about what Andy Staples wrote today, which was very clearly
I didn't read it. I'm sorry, so I don't know the.
said was the Big Ten. This is the time for the Big Ten to strike. This is the time for the Big Ten to go out and instead of waiting to see where the fight goes, start the fight. I just got through watching Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai, strike first. In other words, go strike first. Go to the Pac-12 and poach. Go get Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA. Build a super league in the Big Ten that protects you, that you can get the big TV money, that might satiate Michigan, satiate Ohio State, make them happy, where their tendencies now to have a little bit of a stray eye. Because if I'm Ohio State, I'm picking up the phone. I'm telling you, I'm not saying this is happening, but if I'm them, I'm exploring.
I think everybody is looking, and I don't know. If I'm in the Big Ten, the first thing, if I'm a president in the Big Ten, I might have to clean my undershorts thinking that Kevin Warren is going to be having to handle this. Because right now, you think about this. Jim Phillips is a pretty bright guy. They got a lot of cop, but he's a newbie. You got a Pac-12 guy, as I said, is a newbie. You got Kevin Warren. Bob Bowlesby is the second most experienced. Well, he's actually the most experienced commissioner, but now in a emaciated conference. And Greg Sankey is the big boy, and he's strutting. He's doing. What's the guy? What's the guy that does the? Is it Conor McGregor that does the McGregor? He's probably in doing that and probably thinking, okay, Mark Emmert, I'll take over for you now. I'll run this college football thing.
I know we got to get to some other things, Chris, but you bring something up, and we haven't tied it in. I haven't heard Friday's podcast. You very well may have, and if you did, I apologize. Another thing happened when we first started this show.
Our podcast, Friday?
Yeah.
Yes, I did, and I did an extra one because of this.
Well, hold on. Here's what I'm getting at, though.
Okay.
Last summer, when the Big Ten said we just can't do this, play football, we can't do it, and the Pac-12 said we can't either. Golly goodness, y'all, we just can't do it. I know for an absolute fact, you do too. We've talked about it. The power schools in that league were furious. They were
the football school, Nebraska and Ohio State in particular, you're right.
Were so angry at the lack of leadership. And that's the word that got used. Those were the words that got used in private circles. I feel very confident saying that with the sourcing that I have, that you have. They were very unhappy with the lack of leadership. They admired what the SEC did, as you saw, because the SEC said, hey, we think we can do this. Think we can do it? Go back and remember what Sankey said. He said, hey, we're going to take this one day at a time. If we get to a place where we can't do it, we won't do it, but we think we can do it. And then they did it. And it really made the SEC look strong. And while people privately may have said, hey, we're really proud of the Big Ten, boy, we were responsible and we were careful and we got it done. And in the end of the day, one of our teams played in the title game. Blah, blah. That's not what they thought privately. Privately, they seethed all thought because they knew that one league had absolutely put their foot on their neck, and that was the SEC. And now they do it again with Texas and Oklahoma. And there's a lot of stuff, man. There's a lot of stuff out there now that just is under the surface that's out there that if I'm Kevin Warren, who has had a bad year. If I'm Kevin Warren, I've got answers for when Michigan comes calling, when Penn State comes calling, when Ohio State comes calling and says, hey, how did this happen without us being involved?
Yeah, and I tell you, I just keep thinking of it. Poor SOB Bob Bowlesby. He may have saved the college football season for us last year. Because if you think about it, Jim Phillips was kind of new and coming in, and he jumping in with the SEC. Because if it's just the SEC, but Bob Bowlesby says, hell yeah, we're and then an ACC, and then then it made the Pac-12 and the Big 12 look like fools, whereas the SEC could have been standing by themselves. So Bob did a whole lot to help, and then. Look at him today. He's sitting there scrambling with a league. Oh boy, it's just it's an interesting deal. We're going to get it's look, there's so much, and I do think it's going to be so intriguing to see what goes on behind the scenes. We're going to talk a little bit about what happens with the other leagues and what might happen there. We're going to do that in a little bit, but
Yep.
I know you've got a nice word from one of our great sponsors, and then folks, after that, we're going to talk about Kentucky and LSU, and then we'll get more into the expansion talks after that.
Yeah, we'll get to the Wildcats and the Tigers in just a minute. First, I want to tell you we're brought to you by Blue Sky. Blue Sky believes in being fast, fresh, and friendly through the thoughtful layout and cleanliness of their stores. Blue Sky hopes to provide customers with a fast and easy buying experience from services to products. Blue Sky plans to keep things fresh and always provide the freshest flavors of their brand name products and the best services available. They even bring in some of the newest products on the market to their stores to provide an even better customer experience. A smile can say it all, and at Blue Sky, they want to show their customers they care about them and their shopping experience. They'll always strive to improve their efforts to accomplish exactly that. So check out Blue Sky today at any one of their 48 store locations across the Southeast. And speaking of Blue Sky, happy birthday to my friend Ben Craddock of Blue Sky. Ben, if you're out there, happy birthday to you. Hope you're having a wonderful birthday. We're also brought to you by Alpha Specialties, located 1670 Highway 80 in Pearl, Mississippi. They're your trailer-specific professionals. If you want to haul it, they can call it at Alpha. They're the premium trailer dealership in Mississippi in the Southeast. They've got Load Trail. It's the premium brand trailer, the highest quality utility equipment dump and gooseneck trailer being built today. They also have Hallmark cargo trailers, one of the most quality cargo trailers on the market. It's perfect for hauling goods to markets and shows, ATVs to deer camps, hauling race cars and more. Alpha can even work with you with third parties to have game day trailers, concession trailers built, maybe for your high school season, your middle school season, whatever the case may be. They can handle that there at Alpha. They can also do all types of truck accessories. Listeners get 10% off a yearly trailer service and inspection at Alpha's full service shop. They can repair all types of trailers, concession, horse, utility, enclosed, gooseneck, RV, and more. So give them a call at 601-932-9798 or check them out at alphaofms.com. That's alphaofms.com.
And a reminder to search for, like, and subscribe to the Landry Football Podcast channel on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so you can listen to us here on SEC Football and Beyond. You can listen to Scout's Eye, Landry Football Podcast. Also got some good news. We'll be doing some other conference work, well, on the Twitch channel as well on the network too. So look out for that. And check out over to LandryFootball.com. We've got all the college previews done. All you got to do is pick your favorite team, pick your favorite conference, all the roster breakdowns. Working on the NFL now. We'll have all of them out here in the next, starting tonight and tomorrow. So a lot going on there. As we transition, we're going to get back to some talks with the expansion, but as we have been doing, we're going to do two-a-days, continue with that. And today, Kentucky and LSU are up on the docket. And as I mentioned, for those of you that kind of new with this, the way I've done it is going back over my film grade notes of last year, looking at film notes this year, spring notes, and kind of going through some research. And, we've talked about Kentucky a lot since we've started, been doing this SEC podcast, SEC Football and Beyond for 3 years. But since Neil joined me here, it's been such a blessing here last year at this time. We've talked both about how the consistency of the Kentucky program is very admirable. And, you think about it, only Saban has been with this school longer. Dan Mullen's been in the SEC longest, or second longest to Saban, with obviously Mississippi State and Florida. Very consistent program. And the thing that jumps out at me overall is that they're smart recruiters. They understand. They are not necessarily, they'll go into the South, but they tend to recruit up. They're the most northern school in the conference, and they go up into Ohio, and that's where obviously Mike has a lot of background. I think it's the ultimate developmental program in the SEC. Think Iowa, ironically, where Mark graduated from. I think Michigan State under D'Antonio when things were going well. They've done a really good job of building a team. The offense in the past is built to complement the defense. as they go forward, and I thought it was an interesting move, we're going to get into it, bringing Liam Cohen. Eddie Gran did a phenomenal job a couple of years ago, taking a non-quarterback, a receiver, putting him at quarterback and milking as much blood out of the turnip as you can. But they've got to, in the eyes of Mark Stoops, and I think they've got to get more out of the passing game because they're so limited there. And this is what they're going to go. They're not going to throw it all around the boat. You know, Liam Cohen is coming off the Sean McVay tree. People think Sean McVay's a throw it around guy. He's not. It's condensed formations. It's a lot of pre-snap motions. And it's a lot about the running game and the in-cut pass games, which are quarterback friendly. It's going to be, they're going to need more from their quarterback position. The offense will have more play action, more outside zone, less between the tackles. I think Brad White's done a good job as a defensive coordinator. He really has. The defense is mean, physical, smart, particularly in the secondary, with good pass rushes. They're smart, disciplined program with a good defense. They had the best defensive force turnover rate in the SEC last year and 10th nationally. The explosive pass rate was the worst in the SEC, however, in 122nd nationally. You talk about, you know, up-tempo, we've talked about some of the teams in Tennessee and Ole Miss. This is the opposite of that. This is the slowest snap rate offensively in the SEC and third slowest in the nation. Average 30.1 seconds between snaps. In the past, the offense has survived, not thrived, but survived without a passing attack. It's the worst in the SEC last year, in the bottom fifth nationally. If you look at their 5-year recruiting analysis, I went back, they're 12th in the SEC. 12th in the SEC out of 14. Yet, they're top 25 in the country in wins and player development. As I mentioned, Liam Cohen, I think, is going to be interesting to see what he does with this offense, what he's able to develop with it, and see how I think it's going to play to their style. I think they're still limited in passing skills, the outside zone scheme. I think the quarterback play is a big question mark. Love the running backs. They've got two good receivers. They need more if they're going to be successful. The offensive line is very good. Make the case that it's as good as anybody experience-wise going into the league, the two top tackles. Defensive line is good. Now, the defense disruptive rate last year dropped quite a bit. They have always been very disruptive. But they really dropped to outside the top 100 nationally after being in the top 25 the past 3 or 4 years. Disruptive rate, you know, creating pressures and sacks, getting the ball out quickly. Really like their safeties. Like them a lot. The cornerbacks are young. 3-4 defensive base. They clog the middle. They bring edge pressure when they're doing it right. In terms of players, I think Darian Kennard's a blue-gray player. You know what blue-gray players are if you've been following along with us. They're in that top players in the country. Reds are players that win for you. They've starter-type production in the league. I think Chris Rodriguez is an elite back, and I think Kavasier Smoke, one of the great players, is one of the great names, is a very good one as well. Keep an eye out for Wan'Dale Robinson. He is a very productive player for Nebraska, and I know Nebraska didn't have great offenses. Big-time playmaker, and I think he's really good. Darrell Rosenthal is the transfer from LSU at right tackle, is a red great player. I think Marquand McCall, the nose guard, is a red great. Jordan Wright, the jack backer. DeAndre Square, I think, is very underrated at outside backer. And I think Yusef Coker, the free safeties, really good. Like this team, looking at their schedule, I think the swing games are Missouri. I got them winning it, but I think it's a swing game.
So let's walk through this because
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Pick it up from there.
Yeah, I got the schedule up on the site. So they open September the 4th, Louisiana Monroe. September the 11th, they get Missouri at home. Chattanooga a week later at South Carolina. That's 4 games right there that should be wins. Assuming they beat Missouri, you're off to a 4-0 start. The schedule gets a lot harder from there. Florida comes there. LSU comes there October 2nd, October 9th, respectively. Then Kentucky goes to Georgia and to Mississippi State. And then I think the schedule gets a lot easier in the back third. They go at home November the 6th against Tennessee, at Vanderbilt November the 13th, New Mexico State November the 20th, and then at Louisville November the 27th. Chris, I think they could go 4-0 at the front, 4-0 at the back. You get one of the four in the middle, you're a 9-3 team.
Yeah, I think they're going to start off 4-0, then they're going to be 4-3, then I think they're going to be 9-3. If they lose one of those, 8-4. Here's the Missouri's a good team. I think Kentucky's better. I think Florida is winnable, but not likely. LSU's got more talent. It has to be more about LSU there if they're going to win that game. Don't like the chances against Georgia. The game that would concern me the most is at Mississippi State, because stylistically, if they have a couple of breakdowns defensively and they're having to play from a chase position, that's a game that Mississippi State can upset them. I think that 9-3 makes a lot of sense. 8-4, you take care of business in all of those, and you upset one of them. Yeah, you could get to 10. I don't think that's realistic. I mean, I don't think that should be the expectation personally, but it is not out of the question. Listen, I just really impressed with what they've done. If you think about it, last year, and look, you are what your record says you are, okay? But when I went back and looked, and if you looked at the record was 9. They were 4-6, but 3 of them came to SEC West crossover games, and in 2 of those they had the botch field goal spot against Auburn. Hey, look, you got to take care of business. You got to win it. But that was a problem. Then you had the 2 missed extra points against Ole Miss. It coulda, woulda, shoulda. But when you looked at them on film, you didn't see a whole lot between a 4-6, 6-14. But the point I would make is that they did it without the usual disruptive pressure up front defensively and with no passing game. They just maximize what they have. And if they can get a little bit more production out of the defense, the schedule's more favorable, and get something out of the offense a little bit, because I think they've got 2 good receivers. I just don't think that's enough when you get in some of this. Quarterback play is going to be key. And I think the future at quarterback is getting there. I just don't think it's there yet. We'll see. I think they're the 3rd best team in the East. Some people think Missouri. I think it's them. We'll see. I think it's close, though.
I think it's close, and if you told me that they're not 3rd, that they're either 2nd or 4th, Chris, I'm picking them 2nd.
Ahead of Florida, okay.
I like them on both lines of scrimmage. They get Florida at home early enough in the year that Florida might still be sort of finding itself a little. A lot of momentum, and I just think the guy's done a hell of a job there. I really do.
There's no question about that. And look, give him a lot of credit. He made some changes on that coaching staff that guys that were really, really close to him. But he thought, look, this has to be done to get us to the next level. I think he's recognized that they've got to do a little bit more. A little bit of kind of what we've talked about with Kirby having to do at Georgia on a different level. This is what he feels like he needs to do. We've got to score more points because we can't live in like that. So that's a look at the Kentucky Wildcats. Now on to the LSU Tigers. As you look at this team, and the thing that jumps out at me the most is the lack of consistency. We all know the storyline, right? Win the national title 2 years ago. Collapsed last year. Now you can take it a couple of ways. Well, it was a COVID year and they didn't handle it well. They lost a ton of players. All those things are true. What's really true is bigger picture, and this is where I want to hit with LSU, is that when you are a coach, as a head coach, and you're not a great X's and O guy, there's old saying, the great coaches can coach the coaches. The ones that can't have got to delegate well, and they better get it right on their staff, because once you hire them, they kind of go and they do it. And if you have no ability to fix it, it's like the head coach that comes in and says, well, I don't like what we're doing. Well, how do you want to do it? I don't know. It's just not working. Well, that's not an answer. It's been a whirlwind with this coaching hires. I think his admitting that he didn't interview in person Bo Pelini, among others, was, to me, more of an embarrassment and shows why they've been a little bit flawed in terms of how they do things. The team last year was not engaged, and I thought they quit. I mean, I thought the two teams that looked like they just let go of the rope the most was probably Vanderbilt, somewhat Tennessee, and then LSU was in that category. I think the lack of leadership has been a big part. The hires are young, they're engaged. I think it's the safest bet in the world to say they're not going to be as good as they were 2 years ago, and they're going to be better than last year. But what does that really mean? How they look? How do they grow? How do they come together? What's the future? All of those things, maybe more questions there than any. They're focusing on the offensive line. They're bringing back a lot of guys. They'd be bringing back all five if Darryl Rosenthal wasn't off the team. They're focusing more on five-man protection so they can get more receivers out in routes. They took a big step back in the pass game. The defensive front is deep. I think it's the best corners, 3 corners in college football on one team, best corner group, and I think we'll see how the safeties grow up. I think that they are one of the best secondaries in the country. Better communications needed. Derek Stingley is an elite pro prospect, and he was running like a chicken with his head cut off a lot last year. Poor communication. They got to reduce coverage breakdowns. They're going to continue to be nickel-based in the 40 front. You could see the talent last year on film, but you can see the lack of discipline. You know, when people try to ask me what's the difference and why, when Alabama makes coaching changes, and they do every year, the message doesn't change. When Ed makes it, the message changes, and it's either a hit or miss. So we've got to see where it is. It's the second worst in the SEC and 122nd nationally in explosive runs. His team couldn't run the football last year to save their life. Their pass game, that passing game that may have been the best single year in college football history 2 years ago, 61st nationally. Drastic changes again, risk or reward. The offense allowed 25 sacks, 7 of them against Mississippi State. They didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher for the first time there since 2012. They're adapting to 5 new coaches. Jake Peets and DJ Menges worked with Joe Brady. They're kind of trying to call back the magic there. That's got to the run game's got to change. The defense allowed a school record of 35 points a game and 192 yards per game. That was just awful for all the talent that they have. Durante Jones is the defensive coordinator now, coming in with his NFL ties on communication on the field, making adjustments and communicating well. And that comes with understanding the defense, which they didn't do a very good job, which comes from preparation. So that's the real key there. I think that the defensive message is a big part of what they had a problem with, and I think that'll change. I think that'll be a positive. How much better? Don't know. I think they'll be better offensively and defensively. I think they've got elite talent. I've said, in terms of the overall SEC, Alabama, Georgia have the best talent, and the third most talented roster is LSU, not A&M. The third best team, I'm not sure it's LSU. We shall see. I don't know if they third, fourth, fifth. I don't know. The rush offense worked as bad as anybody in the SEC. When I looked at schematically how they ran it, how they blocked it, it was as bad as anybody. The worst numbers, but they probably did it as bad, relatively speaking, to the talent that they have, definitely. The passing game efficiency, not in the top 60. Those are some of the things that jump out at me. I think the tendency for folks that will defend Ed is that he's not to blame if the assistants don't do their job because he's recruiting well. But he's the head coach, and he gets credit for he was the head coach. He may not have found Joe Brady, but it worked, and it worked swimmingly, and he deserves credit. But he also deserves the blame for the disaster with Matt Canada, Bo Pelini, and making 2 coordinator hires and firing them after 1 year is just incompetence in how you are managing and organizing your staff. So LSU's talent, look, blue-grade player. I think Kayshon Boutte's the next great receiver there. He's a blue-grade guy. I think Cade York is as good a kicker as there is in the country. I think Edward Ingram is a blue-grade guard. I think the offensive line is going to be really good even without Rosenthal, and would have been even better with him. I think Derek Stingley is not only a blue-grade corner, but a red-grade punt returner. I think Trey Palmer is a red-grade kick returner. I mean, I think they've got the best return game. I think Ali Gay's a great defensive end. I think Eli Ricks is a corner that you don't know enough about that is really, really good. I think Todd Harris and Jay Ward may surprise at safety. Neil Farrell, Glenn Logan, B.J. Ojulari is a big-time talent. This team has a lot of talent, Coaching development's key. When I look, let's go ahead, Neil, take it. Let's look at their schedule, and let's go from there.
Yeah, I got the schedule up on the ticker. LSU opens in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena against UCLA September the 4th. Then they come home for a couple of weeks. McNeese comes to town September the 11th. Central Michigan September the 18th. Then LSU hits conference play at Mississippi State September 25th. Home SEC opener a week later, October the 2nd against Auburn. At Kentucky, we referenced that game earlier. LSU at Kentucky October the 9th. Then things get pretty interesting for a few weeks for the Tigers. Florida comes to Baton Rouge October the 16th. LSU goes to Ole Miss October the 23rd, a week off. And then LSU goes to Alabama November the 6th. And then the Tigers finish the month of November at home. They get Arkansas at home November the 13th. Louisiana Monroe at home on November the 20th. And then Texas A&M wraps up the regular season in Baton Rouge on November the 27th. So a schedule that starts with a couple of real interesting games. UCLA, Mississippi State in September. October is certainly interesting for the Tigers with Auburn, Kentucky, Florida, Ole Miss, and then starts and finishes with 2 very difficult games in November at Alabama, LSU at home. Sandwiching home games against Arkansas and Louisiana Monroe.
I think Florida and A&M are the swing games. Personnel-wise, they're close enough that could go either way. I think they probably split them. I think Kentucky's certainly a challenge, but LSU's better. Look, as a roster, based upon what I said, they don't play Georgia. They're an 11-1 roster. I look at them as a 10-2, 9-3 team. But then again, it's mainly due to the talent level. The Florida game, again, you are what your record says they are. They beat Florida last year. Florida wasn't prepared to play the game, and if it's not for a thrown shoe, Florida still probably wins the game. But just, hey, whatever. You got to do what you got to do, and you can't. The first key to winning games is to not lose them. So we'll see, and that's going to be the key to LSU. So what is it? I think this team has maybe the biggest range when you look at their talent level and what we question about what the finished product is going to be. Because again, just a pure overall talent, they're probably 11-1. Probably we think they're more likely high ceiling would be 10-2, 9-3, maybe a little bit more, and then some people that just don't believe in it could be 8-4. If it is 8-4, it's the beginning of the end for Ed. I just think this needs to be a pivotal year, and I think a lot of it is how you do it. But talent-wise, they can't be losing 4 games with this roster as good as it is, and yet we don't know that they may not end up 8-4.
I know they're super talented. I get it. But I also know what I saw a year ago. And I know it's COVID and everything, but everybody else was going through COVID too. That was a chaos season. That was a chaotic program.
Yes.
And I'm not. It's hard for me to believe. And if I'm wrong, I'll. It won't be the first time. It won't be the last time. It's hard for me to believe that a program can go from that level of chaos the chaos that it has in the regular season, the coach jogging down the road without his shirt on, the AD wanting to fire him, and the AD is so mad at Ed Orgeron. The pictures of Ed with the girl naked on it's just such bad judgment. It's such bad judgment. Things that never happened to Nick Saban 101. You know what I mean? It's jogging down the road without his shirt on, go Tigers, and all that. I'm not making fun of Ed, but it's hard for me to believe that that guy, on the heels of that, puts it all together and they're 10-2, 11-1 in a schedule where I look at it and I go, okay, I think they beat UCLA, but I want to see it. I want to see what they look like against Mississippi State. I think they win that game, but I want to see it. I want to see what they look like against an Auburn team that punished them a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what they look like at Kentucky against a Kentucky team that, in my opinion, might be 5-0 that day. Game day on campus, the whole deal.
Yeah, I think that's 2 unbeatens there.
And if that's the case, boy, you're walking into a big-time atmosphere in Kentucky. People will be talking about that as the biggest game in Kentucky football since, hell, I don't know, Chris, a long time. Then you get Florida. Florida gets up for LSU. You know Dan Mullen's going to want that game. You get Ole Miss. Ole Miss has a real chance of being 6-1 when LSU comes to town. It's going to be retiring Eli Manning's jersey, all that stuff. It's going to be an interesting game. They're not as good as Alabama, as you said. Nobody is. There's no shame there. Alabama's the best team in the country. They'll beat Arkansas. They'll beat Monroe. And then Texas A&M is going to be an absolute brawl there at the end. So, listen, if you're right and they're a 10-2 team at the end of the year, I'm going to say, Chris, man, you nailed it. But if 10's my over-under, I'm going under.
Yeah, well, again, I think roster-wise, they're 11-1, 10-2. I think A&M beats them. Alabama beats them. And I think it comes down to Florida. I do think that if they have to get in a shootout in Oxford, that could be another loss. That's where that game becomes like a difficult one for the LSU folks. Again, talent level, I'm just saying talent level where they are. And Ed's not going to fix it. He has to hope that he made the right hires, like he did 2 years ago and like he didn't do last year. And I think it may be, we'll see. I think Ed, unless something drops out of the closet that's overly embarrassing, which has been kind of common at LSU, but recently, I think Ed is going to be back for 2022. But go and do a 8-4 type of season, and it's going to be a lot of pressure to the next year because he's not really Scott Woodard's type of guy. Mm-mm. But Scott's a real politician, and he ain't going to move on a guy that's 1 year away from a national championship. And if he has a good year and he does go 10-2, well, then you can't really do that. But I think that is already kind of something to watch down the road. I think they're the most intriguing team because of their talent level, but their coaching. I think A&M and Florida are close enough to them, talent-wise, to where coaching that's better coached teams that they probably win. And I think 9-3 is probably where they're going to go. And you know what? They may win one of those games and lose another one. Certainly I think Kentucky does a better job coaching, but that's one that they probably are going to be able to beat. So I kind of think I side more, in my thoughts, more 9-3. 10-2 is where they probably should be, if not 11-1 talent-wise. Going to be fun.
What's interesting about them, and I agree with this completely, their roster is super talented. And if you told me that a team surprised and blew people away, I would say it's LSU. But I also have covered chaos before, Chris, and I've covered chaos on talented rosters. And you can lose a talented roster. You can lose it because
well, he did last year.
He lost.
So, I mean, you don't have to,
so things get weird early. Drop one that you're not supposed to drop. And look, I've just covered this league for a long time, and I've watched Auburn go to LSU and win. And I can see a scenario where Kentucky is just jacked for LSU, where Florida is just jacked for LSU, where Ole Miss is just jacked for LSU. And you get those week after week after week, and somebody pops you, and then boom, there's Alabama. And I could see I could see the threads unraveling. So for me, you're right. There's a lot of variance here because I can make a scenario for them going 10-2, no problem. That's easy. They lose to Alabama, they lose to A&M, and they don't lose another one. I can make a scenario for them dropping 4 or 5 games where the pressure.
Yeah, if they lose 5, then there's a major problem because, look, they got blown out by Mississippi State and Auburn, but that was because of dysfunction that I think they'll have some of. I think they'll have some of that corrected. I don't think Auburn and I listen. I think Ole Miss, because of their offense, could be challenging, but I think Mississippi State and Auburn, if they don't win those games, we're dealing with a lot of problems. But gonna be interesting to see how that plays out.
Hey,
go ahead.
A little bit of breaking news in the SEC tonight. Missouri Athletics Director Jim Sturk is stepped down. He is stepping down effective, I think, pretty soon. Apparently, this is pretty big shock in.
Well, I hope he's healthy. First thing you think about, I hope your health is okay. He's usually that timing usually comes along with, may have been planned internally, but that's the first thing I think of. So I hope he's well.
Been there for 5 years. So Jim Sturk out at Missouri. My friend Gabe DeArmond, PowerMizzou.com broke that story. So that's pretty big. Yeah, when you see that happening on July the 26th, there's usually something. Hopefully that's not health. Hopefully it's just someone deciding, hey, I need to step away for personal reasons, or just to step back or retire or whatever. But more on that, I'm sure, later in the week. And you can, if you go to PowerMizzou.com, it's part of the Rivals Network. Nobody does a better job than Gabe and those guys at Power Mizzou. If you're a Missouri fan and you want to read the rest of that, check them out.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're running a little short on time. We're going to talk a lot more about expansion as it relates to, SEC, and it's going to be, as I said, the Pac-12 starting their media days on Tuesday, and that's going to be the center of what's going on. The expansion talk is everywhere. We're gonna get with. We're certainly going to talk about how it's going to affect everyone and what could happen, and the latest news and notes on that. I know a bunch of you have brought in a lot of questions. Anything jump out at you there? And the questions, everybody, a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions. We'll see here as we go out the door if we got any questions that we need answered here. Let's see. Would Oklahoma State be more attractive than Missouri or do the SEC? No, Missouri's not going anywhere. No, and it would not be. You don't want to have 2 Oklahoma teams. That's not something that we see here. I honestly think geographically, ideally, that, talking about the Oklahoma State with the Pac-12, Chris, you seem to be higher on LSU than most of the peers in the media. Well, I'm not a member of the media. I wish I don't get to go to media days, but just a evaluator, scout at talent level. I don't know how good we went over that enough. We'll see. We'll see how. I think there's another question. Anything that jumps out to you? That is it true that the Big Ten turned down Texas and Oklahoma because OU isn't an AAU school? No. There's Big Ten hadn't turned down, and Texas. This apparently has been going on for over a year, and what I understand is since January I forgot. Let me check his name. Kevin Elfite, the University of Texas Regents chair, he was the guy that put the proposal together for the SEC on Texas's behalf as early as January. So that's that's kind of it's been in play for a while. Hey, by the way, real quick
on the wall.
How about this? How about Greg Sankey meeting with Bob Bowlesby and others discussing the 12-team playoff while at the same time they're discussing stealing 2 of his teams?
I'm telling you, the guy.
Good Lord.
The guy is an absolute star. Sankey is, and he's proved it over the last year. He is one sharp, put together guy. You get around him, and it's all about, hey, I've been running 380 something straight days or whatever, where he's run for 35 minutes or more, which is, if you're much of a runner, 35 minutes, there's kind of a little magic number there. That means you're getting around that 4-mile mark every day, and you keep doing that day after day after day after day. You're a badass. Neil,
as I was talking to my sister, she was asking me how I was feeling. I said, it's kind of bad. You know you're getting old when you wake up and it feels like I did after a football game. Except I didn't practice or play yesterday. My neck hurts, my back hurts, my hip hurts, and my knee hurts. So at that 35 minute mark of which you speak, that's when they put me under, because there's no 35-minute mark when with me walking. It's a wobble fest. So no, I can't do it. Hey, we appreciate everybody joining us. Remember, we're going to join you here live again. Check us out at twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football Thursday, 5 o'clock. We'll be back with you. And, of course, the podcast version will drop. Sign up on Friday. Sign up for Landry Football's podcast channel on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, we got this show. We're going to be adding right before this show, starting next week. We're going to have an ACC and beyond on Mondays, Big Ten football and beyond on Tuesdays, Big 12 football and beyond, whatever left of it, on Wednesdays, Pac-12 football and beyond on Thursday, and then the Scout's Eye on Pro Football on Fridays, and then leading right into it. And so we'll have great stuff for you as the season approaches. Neil, great to have you back. We've got so much that we're going to talk about, I know. Thanks to everybody for all their thoughts and question marks, and have a great week. And by then, we don't know where the music will stop, and we'll see who can fit into the chairs. We'll have more on the expansion stuff probably for the days and weeks come. Oh, by the way, A&M, Florida on two-a-days, live Thursday, 5 p.m. Central. Be here. Aloha. So long, everybody. Thank you, Neil. Talk to you next time, everyone.
See you, Chris.